have everyone muted, hoping to avoid as much background noise as we can. Carla is on our webinar to provide tech assistance. So if you're having any issues with audio or anything else, go ahead and send a message to Carla.
Yep, I'll be here. You can either send me a message or you can email me at info@Literacy Action Network. I'll monitor that too.
Great. Thanks, Carla.
Sure.
So welcome to web chat. We've got a little bit of a smaller group here than sometimes here in the room, but on this slide is a list of our whole team. So currently speaking, this is Jody, and I am the Program Quality Specialist on the team. And this is Julie Dinko, I'm the Transition Specialist.
Todd Wagner here, State Director.
And that's it for who's in the room today. Brad is away at an NRS training in St. Louis. Sherry and Astrid are both off on vacation. And I think Alice is also out today. So maybe like many of you, we've got kind of a smaller crew over the summer.
Yeah.
So just, letting you know that we want to hear your ideas and your comments, and the ways that you can do that are go ahead and type anything into the chat function, and we will try and keep our eyes on that. If you prefer to have us unmute you and you want to verbally ask a question, just raise your hand and we can definitely make that happen. And as Carla said, go ahead and reach out to her with any needs, any technical assistance needs that you have. So here's kind of an overview of the things that we are planning to talk about today. And as always, time throughout and at the end to address any other follow-up questions or any other topics that you want to hear about. All right. Okay. And as Jody mentioned, Astrid is out, and so I'm going to give you the professional development updates. Hang on, sorry. And it's just a reminder of some upcoming dates and some other things. Obviously, the Adult Basic Education Summer Institute will be happening in August. And we want to do a special promotion of ABE Foundations, which is an overview of the basics for new staff and those who might need a refresher. That is a pre-conference session. Also, there is a CCRS Foundations ELA or Math, and that will talk about the overview of the standards and instructional shifts. Again, a pre-conference, along with something new, which is Google Applied Digital Google Applied Digital Skills Curriculum. It's a mouthful. That's actually Wednesday morning, right before the conference starts, a pre-conference. Then we have the poster sessions on Thursday and regional meetings on Thursday as well from 4 to 5. And then you might want to mark your calendars. I'm not going to read all these dates, but these are a lot of upcoming professional development events that will be happening this fall. So it's a full schedule. Okay. No, that's fine. And then in the spring, we also have some dates that have already been set, and you might want to be mindful of those as well. As far as the fall ABE managers meeting, we have set a date, and as November 19th. It was a little bit later than last year's. The tentative location is at the Metro North Event Center, which is north of the Minnesota Department of Education here, and it will most likely be from 9 to 3:30 p.m. And what we'd like you to do right now is if you could put in the chat box any ideas or topics that you want discussed at the fall managers meetings, or you want training on, or you just want more information on. And if you could chat that into the chat box right now, we would like to see what you're interested in hearing at that event. I know it's a ways off, but it helps us in planning for the day. We would also be interested in hearing any suggestions you have. You can email or contact any of the state staff here with suggestions or ideas. So we have one here, a possible discussion on where we need to head as a field during a time of full employment. Good suggestion. College placement assessments as well. Yep, these are all current topics that many consortium managers and teachers are struggling with and trying to find out. I also, in the chat room, what was the date and location again for the managers meeting? Yeah, we'll just go back a slide here. The date is Tuesday, November 19th. And the location is the tentative, but we think it will be at the Metro North Event Center. And so TABE 11 and 12, will there be some preliminary data? There might be, I'm not sure, but that's something we can definitely discuss and maybe do some sharing at the managers meeting about that. Oh, and we have a request to go back to the other professional development dates, possibly. Yeah, we can go back to that. We actually do have, yeah, I do think these are all listed on a one-page flyer on the Atlas website.
Or there certainly all should be on the Atlas calendar.
Yep, as well as these, yep.
Yes, and thank you, Nancy. Yep, the PowerPoint is available in the materials section if you'd like to take a look at it, use it later, and or use it again with your staff, or parts of it again with your staff.
And we also got another suggestion for growth cap rate and how it is affected by shrinking ABE contact hours. These are all great suggestions, and we will look at these and work on something for fall managers meeting. And again, if anything comes up, just contact any of us. All right. Transitions. Just wanted to remind people that the Pathways to Prosperity grant is out. I think anyone who is applying, you may have been contacted by other entities that want to partner with ABE. I strongly encourage adult basic education to participate in this grant. This is one grant where we're actually written into the RFP. The deadline is Friday, July 19th. So if you could just chat in the box, I'd like to know if any consortia are currently involved, either in planning or have been asked to be involved in a Pathways to Prosperity grant.
So Rochester,
Metro North,
Duluth, Metro North,
Moorhead,
Moorhead. Oh, fantastic. I'm too new to
St. Paul, Metro East.
Yeah, looks like a lot.
Lots of involvement. That's great.
Oh, this is good to hear. Very good. This is fantastic. Thank you so much. All right, just a reminder, the regional transition plans, the final reports for this past fiscal year are due July 15th. The report will be reviewed. If there are questions regarding activities, then the regional transition coordinators will be contacted regarding that. As for the upcoming plans, they were submitted in June. They were reviewed, and the plans are currently in the approval process. Some have been submitted, or some have been approved. Others just need a few clarifying questions answered, and then they'll be approved as well. Overall, they were a great set of transitions plans. I want to thank everyone who read the Integrated English Literacy and Civics Education plans. The reviewers did an incredible job. I'm always amazed at the comments, the insight that they provide in reviewing these grants. So I want to thank the reviewers and then announce those that did receive Integrated English Literacy and Civics Education grant. They're listed on this screen or this slide. There were 5 we were not able to fund. Overall, we did receive quite a few, and I appreciated the fact that not all consortia asked for the full 100,000 amount. That allowed us to actually spread the funding out a little to work with more consortia. So congratulations to those consortium. The Navigating and Advising Support Services grant, this was the legislature appropriation. These grants are coming to an end. The final report is due July 31st, and these reports are going to be posted on the MNABE.org website so that everyone will be able to review the final reports. And they were designed in a way that really it was to give feedback on what worked and what didn't work in implementing, advising, and navigating in a consortium. Finally, the National Study of the Implementation of Adult Education survey under WIOA will be coming out. This is a survey that will be sent to local providers in mid-October. So more details on this are in a handout that's attached to this web chat presentation. So you can look at other slides if you're interested, and you can also look at a handout that gives you more information on this. This was part of WIOA implementation, is that we need to evaluate how implementation has been going under WIOA. So it's congressionally mandated. It's led by the Federal Institute of Education Sciences in collaboration with OCTAE, and it's conducted by the American Institutes for Research. So some of the questions they're trying to answer are listed on this slide. You know, how basically has programming changed since WIA? But these are the basic questions they're trying to answer. And then this is what the survey is trying to measure. I'll give you just a couple seconds to read through that. And then finally, what to expect. This is just a heads up that this survey will be coming. It'll be coming in mid-October. We're going to ask that all providers, local providers, participate in this survey so that they can get strong data. And the results will be published, I believe, in 2021. Any questions regarding this survey? All right, if not, we'll move on.
Okay, on to GED and high school equivalency testing. Just a quick update, which I'm doing because, as Judy mentioned, Brad is down at an NRS training, and actually related to this first slide, Brad will also be attending the annual summer GED conference in Chicago, and he would like to know if other people are planning to go. And so actually, I think the best thing would be if you are someone who, or you have staff who are planning to attend the GED conference, Brad would really appreciate it if just drop him a quick email You can see his email address there is bradhaskamp@state.mn.us, and perhaps people can connect when they're at the conference. Okay, just a quick update on this last year of GED testing. You can see Brad has put together a list of kind of quick numbers on the left. We had in the bold, you'll see that third bullet, about 2,500 diploma earners, which is more than last year, although still probably half of what our typical historical rate was, which was around 5,000. Pass rate a little higher than national, which has always been true for Minnesota. And in this last year, May was the peak testing month. So, you know, the GED continues to recover from the drop that occurred initially with the switch to the 2014 version, but I think with really what we're seeing with the lower numbers, as is the case with our contact hours within adult basic ed, is just the impact of the current job market, which is very low unemployment rate and very easy for people to find work. And currently, because employers are so desperate to find people to work, there's a reduced demand for high school equivalency. And so until those things change, it's probably likely that we won't see a big change in the GED numbers. Just a quick overview of testing center volume. You'll see that Harmony Adult Ed up in North St. Paul is does the highest volume, or did the highest volume over the last year, with hubs in Minneapolis at the second and third position. You can always, if you're more interested in any of the detailed information about GED, Brad's always happy to respond to that. So if you have questions about any of the data or anything that you're not seeing here, please feel free to send an email to Brad. As you probably know, the one thing that did come out that was sort of a nice change for adult basic ed related stuff in the legislature this last spring was funding to make the GED free for as long as the money lasts. It'll be for all of this next year if the money lasts that long, although we project that it probably won't. So there is a new code that in order to take the test for free, a person when registering needs to put in the MN GED 30 code, and that will provide them with access to the test for free, one time per person per year per test. They have to select Minnesota as the testing location when they log in, when they create their identity with within the GED portal. Actually have to live in Minnesota, so their address has to match as well. And then if they schedule testing at any of the non-corrections testing centers in Minnesota, that promo code will be good. And they have to be sure, and again, use the promo code when scheduling so that they won't be charged for the test. So just a couple cautions here. The way the code works, the way registering to take the GED works is that you pay at registration. So in this case, you apply the code at registration, and it applies to that one testing session. And so if a student, if a tester does not show up for that session, they will have used their free test for the year. And if they register subsequently to go in and take the test, they will have to actually pay for it. Also, once the subsidy runs out, the way the statute is set up, we need to just offer the test completely for free until the money runs out. So if we reach the end of the money, which I think we're projecting we likely will, from that point in the year on, the test would go back to being full price. There would be no subsidy for the rest of the year. Also, the current code, the Minnesota GED 10 code, no longer works. So the only code that's going to work in the system now, going forward in this year, is going to be the MN GED 30 code. So if there are any issues that come up around using the code, getting the subsidy, the rules for whom the subsidy applies or to which tests or for how many tests, any questions like that, they can all go to Brad, and again, Brad's email is there at the bottom of that slide. Quick update then on the current status of our RFP around high school equivalency assessments. So as you probably know, we had a change in statute a couple years ago that requires, or a couple legislative sessions ago, that requires the commissioner to identify the test or tests that Minnesota will recognize for purposes of awarding a testing-based high school equivalency diploma. And that selection by the commissioner is actually being made through an RFP process, and that RFP process is actually being run by the Minnesota Department of Administration, so not our agency, but a different state agency. And they are, as far as we know, sort of in the process of finalizing the competition materials. And we anticipate, I think, still that RFP will be out sometime early fall. And so it will likely be sometime well into this next year, well into the current year, I guess, now that we're in July, before we know what decisions have been made regarding high school equivalency testing and how we'll be proceeding from that point forward. So it's in process. Stay tuned. We should know a lot more by sometime this fall. Assessment updates. Just a couple things quick here to mention. First of all, as of July 1, the TABE 9 and 10 are no longer approved for testing in adult basic ed. That is a federal decision. That's part of the Fed's process for identifying approved tests. The 910 has been replaced by the 1112, which has been approved for use in adult basic ed, essentially replacing the 910. Our sense is that people have done a pretty good job of making that transition. If you have any issues or questions around that, please give us a call or send us an email. There was a little bit of an unexpected change with the CASAS. As you likely know, the CASAS Gold Reading Test was approved for use with ABE students, but CASAS's application to have the GOLS test be approved for use with ELL, with the ESL levels, was not approved. And so CASAS is planning on resubmitting a request for approval of the reading test again this fall, and it likely will be sometime. Our sense is typically that federal review process has taken like up to a year, so it's going to be a while before we'll know the status of the new CASAS Gold test relative to testing ELL students. In the meantime, however, just remember that the CASAS Life and Work series is approved for use with the ESL levels until February 2021. And in fact, past experience has suggested that with those deadlines that don't fall in the fiscal year, the feds have in the past extended them. So it's quite likely, I think, that CASAS Life and Work will be end up being approved for use all the way through the 2021 program year.
All right. We'll move on to some updates about hours and funding across our state. So as you all know, you submitted with your annual application data from your program about contact hours and about students in your program. So this is just a quick overview of the statewide total for the last May 1 to April 30th time period. So we had about 4.4 million contact hours statewide and a little under 59,000 enrollees in ABE. So to give you a sense of the change in contact hours over previous years, this is a significant decline. So the change from 18-19 as compared to 17-18 is about 9% down. And on this chart, you can see that the trend has been downward now for a number of years. Yeah. And as you may know, currently in state statute about our funding, our ABE funding, there is a 10-year average growth rate that is taken into account when figuring out our annual statewide funding, and that currently sits at negative growth, basically. So there was a period of time where that 10-year average growth rate was really positive for us because we'd had a lot of years of growth, but we have now moved past that time, unfortunately. So now our 10-year average is looking pretty unfortunate for the foreseeable future. So, and part of the reason why LAN was working on trying to change that aspect of the state statute. So in terms of our funding, this is just a broad overview of this current year that we are in, the current fiscal year that we are in. This is the total amount of funding that funds our system. So there's a little over 49 million of state funding and about 5.5 million of federal funding. So that's statewide for our entire system. And again, just broad overview. If we ask, well, what does that fund? This is broadly speaking what that funds. There are, as of this year, there are 41 ABE consortia that are funded. A small part of that funding also funds our team, our state ABE team here at MDE. And then some of it funds the ABE support network, which was formerly known as supplemental services. So that is organizations like Atlas and Panda and the distance learning support through the Minnesota Literacy Council. So all of those things are also funded by our total statewide funding. So in terms of what that means, for you locally and your funding for your consortium, we do have projected contact hour rates for this year, and both state and federal, they are significantly higher than last year. And the reason for that is because the total number of contact hours is significantly lower. So when you take the same amount of funding and a lower amount of contact hours, it ends up with a higher rate per hour. So the state contact hour rate for fiscal year 20, which is based on last year's hours, is $7.30. And the federal contact hour rate is 74 cents. So those are the numbers you should be looking at now in terms of making your budget and your plans based on that budget for next year or for this current year that we're in. Okay, just some notes about sort of the funding process at this point in the year. So we are in a new fiscal year that started July 1, and we have made an initial calculation of state aid that is posted on the MDE website, and an email went out from our office, from Sherry. One email went out on June 24th, and an update went out on June 27th, but note that those only went to the fiscal agent contact for each consortium, so that only went to our one contact for each consortium, in case some of you are thinking, wait, I didn't see that email. The reason for 2 emails is because when we posted originally, shortly before June 24th, there was a pretty significant issue identified that we corrected and posted again an updated amount. So the window is still open for you all to be checking those numbers and making sure that that all looks correct and letting us know if there are any other errors or issues that have been identified. Once we reach August 1st, then we will consider that aid calculation final, and then we will send out award letters to programs. So, and just a note on this, we're doing sort of an extra step this year that we haven't done before, and that is that we're asking all consortia to confirm that they have checked that posting of the initial state aid calculation on the MDE website, and that the data that's listed there for the consortium looks correct. So the data that you should be looking at include the total number of contact hours. That's probably the biggest one, or probably maybe the first one you would start with, but also the consortium members to make sure that the correct districts are listed, and taking a look at the census calculations and the LEP calculations associated with those districts, just to make sure those look correct. So we are asking that everyone confirm that they have done that and just send an email to Sherry with that confirmation no later than August 1st. There was an email that went out from Sherry on July 3rd that had a little bit more detail about that. And that one actually did go out to our broader audience of all the managers, coordinators, lead teachers. So you may have seen that email, and you can refer back to that for the link and for a little bit more information. The link is also here on this slide. Just pausing for a second in case there are any questions. Okay. All right, we wanted to offer a few suggestions at this point in the fiscal year about budgets, or maybe not suggestions, but sort of reminders. This isn't by no means anything you can't figure out on your own, but just reminders. We recognize that you probably needed to create a budget before you saw the tentative award amount, right? That's how that works. You needed to have some kind of a budget forecasted or, tentative before July 1. And we also recognize that this year it may have been a little more difficult to do that because there was a significant change in the contact hour rate from last year to this year, which also caused some programs to be capped in terms of their contact hour revenue, which was probably unexpected. So we just wanted to acknowledge that while that's probably difficult every year to forecast that budget, it was probably even more difficult this year, which just means that it would be even more important to be in communication with your business office and make sure that that you're moving forward in the year working with your actual budget, and that any adjustments to any kind of a tentative or a forecast budget get made to reflect your final budget. I mean, you may want to wait until you receive your official award letter in August to sort of formalize that with your business office, but just a kind of a note of encouragement on keeping your eyes on that. And also just a heads up that heading into the fall, we ask for a final fiscal completion report from every consortium. So be looking ahead to that, and just kind of a reminder that when we talk about last year's funding, so fiscal year 19 funding, so the year that ended June 30th, you cannot use any of that federal funding for any expenses after June 30th. For your state funding, you can use up to 20% of the total of your state funding. Sorry, I should have put that on this slide. But for your state funding, you can use any amount that is 20% or below of your total state award for expenses between July 1 and September 30th. However, be aware and please work with your business office. You need to know that those expenses have to be coded correctly in UFARs, or that the process of closing out the fiscal year can get messy. So if you have questions or want a little more support about that, feel free to reach out to us. And just a note that the final fiscal completion report will ask you to list out any of the funding that is used in that extra quarter, that July to September time period. So please be sure to make sure that's accurate on the final fiscal completion report. All right.
Teresa is asking, what is the code for carryover this year?
So the money that was spent in the 5th quarter of last year is the money that shows up on this year's UFARS report. So that would essentially be the 5th quarter of the 17-18 program year. And so the code that would be used with this year's submission of the UFARs for funds that were spent in that essentially 5th quarter of 17-18, which is actually the 1st quarter of 18-19, those would have to be course coded 008.
And expenses that are incurred between July 1 and September 20th, 2019, but coded to the fiscal year 19 funding should be coded 009.
Not until a year.
But not until next year. Yeah, right.
So they would show up on your completion report, but they don't get coded into UFARs until the submission for fiscal year 20, which we're currently in.
Right.
And that's endlessly confusing.
I was going to say completely clear.
If you have any questions about that, in particular, contact Jody or Todd, and we're happy to talk you through that, or talk with the business manager or whatever.
They should know. Your business managers should know.
Yep. Any other questions about financial stuff? Okay. Then we wanted to spend some time on reports and targets and some reminders about program improvement. So first of all, I want to make sure that you know this year, as in the previous couple of years, there are a couple of reports due to our office on August 1st. These reports basically are reporting to us your level gains for the year, your test-based level gains, and also any diplomas awarded through your district, like a credit completion diploma. So those two reports are reports you can run in SID. Please run them and download them as Excel documents, because we copy and paste out of them. And those two reports can be emailed to Sherry, attached to an email, and emailed to Sherry no later than August 1st. And just a note that you need to make sure that all of your data in SID is complete and checked before running those reports. So we assume that you've already done that with all of your data previous to May 1st, because you needed to do that for the annual application data that was submitted. Now make sure that you've done the same for all of your May to June data, because the time period for these reports should be the July 1 to June 30th year. And just a reminder, I've already mentioned this once, but mention it here again. Along with those reports due on August 1st, we also have this new requirement to check the state aid the preliminary state aid calculation on the MDE website and send a confirmation email to Sherry that everything there looks correct.
And we did receive a question about that, about what's the best way to find data around the census check. Is that what you're responding to, Todd?
But I can answer the
Yes,
question.
go ahead.
Okay, all right.
Sure. So regarding verifying census data that's used in the formula calculation, there's actually two sets of census data in the formula. The first is the community ed census count. That data would be available from your school district. However, note that it's unlikely the number that is used in the calculation would be incorrect, because the software that we use to calculate the entitlement automatically pulls that census count data from official sources within the agency. So the more critical issue there would be if you have a member district that is missing, you might be missing their census amounts. But anyway, the verification for that would be to check with your district, with your community ed office, about what number is reported for the census, community ed census. The second number is actually data from the decennial census, and it has not changed from last year to this year. And so the simplest verification for that would just be to look back a year or two at the aid calculation, and you can find those on the department website and make sure that that number is still the same. The only error that we've ever run across on that one is occasionally, perhaps in entering data into the screens that we enter data into, we might inadvertently, I think one time we had a case where we inadvertently left or blanked out that field for a particular district, and the district caught it right away when reviewing their data, and we were able to just replace the number. So anyway, those are the two sources for that census data.
Thank you.
Yep, thanks, Todd. Okay. So just kind of a heads up about our targets for measurable skill gains. So mostly when we talk about measurable skill gains, mostly what we are talking about are level gains that you get, that your students get on tests by pre-testing and then post-testing. We're also including high school completion as a measurable skill gain, so a GED or a diploma. So the Federal Department of Education, the OCTAE office, negotiates with us to set target amounts of percentages for students in each level that that we should be striving for, that will get a measurable skill gain in the course of a year. So this slide shows what those target levels were for the year that just ended, 18-19, and the year that we just started. And the ones marked in green have gone up. So our targets are a little bit to, in some cases, somewhat higher. You'll kind of note that the higher targets are a little more at the higher levels of both ABE and ESL. So that's, mostly informational for you at this point, but you will note in SID, when you run the level gains reports, it will show you your level gains as compared to these federal targets. So what does that mean for us? So I'm going to go back for just a second and just point out that our state, as a statewide system, we have to report our state totals to the Federal Department of Education, but we don't report your individual consortium results to the federal department. That's one number for our state as a whole. But what does happen within our state is that we have a program improvement process that, sort of broadly speaking, one of the things that it serves to do is to try to make sure that we are, as a statewide system, doing our best to work towards those federal targets. We've had a break from program improvement for several years, so if you've only been working in the field for a year or two, you might never have experienced this or heard about it much, but you will start to hear more this year.
Scott is asking if we could go back at the target
So look
numbers.
at the target?
Numbers, yeah, and they are
Yep,
a bit
some
high.
of them are high.
High, yep.
Scott, I can just mention what that reflects is for many years when negotiating targets, we were successful at convincing the feds that we were doing a continuous improvement process, and we would negotiate maybe a 1 or 2 percentage point increase. But this time, I think because the feds are a little bit desperate to meet their performance goals that they negotiate with Office of Management and Budget, they really have pushed people in any area where you're below the national average. They were pushing people to get close to or up to it. And so the green highlighted cells that you see are areas where we were further from the national average than we were on the non-highlighted cells. So a little bit of a change of strategy for the feds, and yep, they pushed the goals up quite a bit.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, so we will be this year restarting an annual program improvement process. And I just want to remind everybody, I feel a little like I've been saying this a bunch of times, but just to make sure everybody's sort of aware of how this process is going to work. So the first step in the process is that in the fall, we will put out a report card. So the screenshot here is the 2018 report card. So that was last year's report card. And so the report card, shows you how your consortium ranks in a number of different measures as compared to the other consortia across the state. This time, there will be a program improvement process based on results that will be shown on that 2019 report card. So the basic way that that's going to work is that 3 of those tables on the report card will have a program improvement benchmark. That will be measurable skill gains for ABE students, measurable skill gains for ESL students, and post-testing rates. So any consortium that falls below that benchmark will be flagged, I'm making air quotes, flagged for possible participation. But it's really important to note that being flagged or like falling under the benchmark on the report card does not automatically mean participation, particularly because with last year's report card, we put those benchmarks in there and somewhere close to half of the consortia in the state fell underneath at least one of those benchmarks. So I just want to reassure you that that's not how this is going to work. It doesn't mean that if you are underneath a benchmark, automatically you will be required to participate. But what it does mean is that from that group of consortia, there will be, some of those consortia will be required to participate in program improvement. So we will take some factors into consideration when making that decision of which consortia will be required to participate. And obviously the first question will be how many consortia are flagged total. But some other things we'll take into account is what's the size of the participants in a particular consortium. So for example, if a consortium only has 6 ESL students, but falls very low on the ESL level gains, we will take that into account and possibly not require that consortium to go through program improvement if that's the only benchmark they fall under. There may be some other unique circumstances that we will take into account. I want to acknowledge that one of the things that we have been hearing quite a bit that I think is a concern for many of you out there is that you have a consortium and overall things are going pretty well, but there may be a site that for whatever reason gains are just look different. One of the scenarios we've heard in a couple consortia is there's a county corrections site where people are kind of in and out and is just logistically harder and more difficult to get gains in that setting. And there's a concern that that one site sort of drags down the results for the entire consortium. So I just want to acknowledge that we hear that, and yep, that's a really reasonable concern and definitely something that we can and will take into account as we look at program improvement for next year. It isn't, we have not yet determined exactly how we will take that into account. I think we'll have to wait and see what the report card results are and which consortia are flagged before we can really kind of dive into that. But do expect potentially, if your consortium is flagged, that might be one of the things that we are thinking about, is what do the results look like when they're broken down by different sites. So, questions?
Yeah. Yep. So could you go over what the program improvement line, it was suggested that someone thought they heard 30% below the federal target.
Yep, that's correct.
Is that correct?
Yeah, 30% below the federal target for measurable skill gains. Yep.
For measurable.
And for post testing, the benchmark is I forget exactly where we set it for post testing rates. Maybe it was below 60%, but I can certainly look that up if you shoot me an email.
Okay. All right. Is it 30 below the super target?
No. Oh wait, sorry. Yes, it is, because we put all of those levels together into one level. Oh yeah, which good point, Mary Lynn. I should have included the super target in the chart of federal targets, and I didn't do that. Do you know that number, Todd, off the top of your head, what our super target is for this year? Okay, we'd have to
figure it out.
We'd have to, do a little math. But you're right, Mary Lynn, it would be 30% below the super target set by the weighted averages of all of the level targets. Brent says it's 43% in both ESL and ABE. That sounds right.
It sounds right to me.
According to SID. Yeah, my only question, and I don't think Jenny's on because she's in St. Louis with Brad at the NRS thing, but what I'm not positive about is whether SID has been updated to reflect the new 1920 targets or whether the old 1819 targets are still there. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Any other thoughts or questions? Okay. Oh, thanks, Mary. Hi, Mary. SID has not been updated for 1920, so that is still the 1819. So it may go up slightly from there, but I don't think significantly.
Okay. All righty.
All right. So just a little more information about program improvement. Once we identify exactly which consortia are required to participate, this is what participation will mean. It will start with a full day workshop on November 20th. So that's the day after the fall manager meeting. So we're hoping that would make it a little more convenient perhaps for folks coming from greater Minnesota. It would mean sticking around the Twin Cities for an extra day. We will also schedule a site visit with one or more of our state ABE team. There'll be some improvement planning and some ongoing kind of technical assistance. So that's what that process will look like, starting in fall 2019 and continuing into spring of 2020. All right, so that's everything that we had prepared to show to you or to share with you today. Just a heads up that there will be the PowerPoint and the handouts and the recording on the LAN website soon after that can be processed and posted. We have a couple more web chats coming up this year. We don't actually have another one in the fall, but we'll do one in January and then another in May. There is an evaluation and there will be a question. There is a question on the evaluation about fall managers meetings. If you have any additional thoughts about stuff you'd like to talk about at fall managers meeting, definitely add those there. And here's all of our contact info. And we are open to any other questions, any other topics, anything you'd like to talk about at this point.
I'm saying program improvement line would be at 30.1%. Assuming the super target's 43, and it would be 30% below that. Is that right? 30% below it?
Yeah, I'd have to check the math, Brent, for sure.
But that should be in the ballpark.
Yep. Yeah, we'll be sure to communicate that directly when we send out, or specifically communicate about that when we send out the report card, so that everybody understands exactly what that benchmark is and whether or not they fell below it. But at this point, we're talking about actually, the report cards that'll go out this fall will still be based on the 18-19
Sure.
target.
Yeah.
Super
so
target.
that is the.
So that is, yeah. So that is. So right. So 43% will be the correct super target that the benchmarks will be set according to that super target for this report card for this fall. Any other questions? Concerns?